Hi, this is Long Vo, and today I am analyzing one of my games from the Burlington Chess Club on June the 5th, 2012. This is round 4 of the tournament, and I am currently rated 1354, and my opponent, Carlos Zubieta, is rated 1568. So let's get started. And my opponent plays d4, and I reply with knight f6, and he plays c4. So now I play g6 with the idea of fianchettoing my bishop and castling kingside. He develops his knight c3. I develop the bishop to g7. Then he takes more center control by advancing his e4 pawn. And at this point, I start to feel the pressure in the center, so I counter with d6. I'm not sure if this is the right move because my openings are not that sharp at this point. I need to study more on the openings, and I did lose a lot of time with the opening moves. So he plays bishop to g5, trying to pin the knight, and I play c5, challenging his d pawn, which I think is a mistake, because if he took and I took back, it would and then he would just take the queen, and then I would recapture and not be able to castle anymore. So luckily for me, he advances his pawn to d5. Which is okay because he's taking this key square for my knight, the c6, so he has a good center control and more space than me. My next move is castling. Then he plays rook to b1. I'm not sure why. I don't really understand that move, but anyways, that's what he played, and I played queen to a5. Now I don't think that's a good move either, because I don't think I had any other moves, and I don't see how active the queen could be in that square, but I guess I thought if I pinned the knight down, I don't know. I thought things would happen. Anyways, I thought that was a bad move, looking back. He plays f3 to solidify his pawn chain, and he has excellent space, I guess, and center control, and I feel a little bit crammed with all my pieces not really having good places to go. So at this point, my light square bishop is totally restricted here. Okay, so nowhere to go here, and here is not very active because even here it's restricted. Okay, so I think he did a good job with restricting my light square bishop. And my next move is knight to a6 with the idea of well, that was the only move I had, and the idea was to go back to c7, then rook to b8, and then perhaps a6, and then pushing the pawns b5, and so then he moves his pawn to e3. I guess with the idea of pushing the b pawn and attacking my queen and getting even more space. And I guess at this point he has the intention of castling kingside. So I try to open up the center. E6, I don't think that's a good move, because if my knight already went to b6, I think I should have followed up with c7 right away. But now this e-pawn move is sort of distracting from the knight, and I figured if I move, I was more concerned with connecting my rooks, so if he does take on d takes e, then I could develop my bishop, taking back on e6. So he decided to develop his bishop instead to d3. I supported my pawn with the rook to e8, and as you can see, I don't think my moves make a lot of sense at this point. I guess I still need to work a lot on my middle game and making more following through with my ideas, such as the knight, and then expanding on the queen side. But I was a bit distracted here, trying to break the center and developing my bishop. So he develops his knight to e2, getting ready to castle and continuing to develop. So now I move my knight to c7. So I think we're both playing very passively at this point, slowly developing and not really exchanging and opening it up. I feel that he may want to keep it closed for some reason. And I think a better strategy would be with the knight here. I should have expanded on the queen side to really open it up, and then perhaps my bishop could find a spot somewhere here. So he castles, and I play a6, following through with the idea of pawn to b5, or before that I may prepare it with rook to b8. And the reason why I would want to do that is because on the b5 square he has the knight, the pawn, the bishop, the rook eventually, and obviously I feel he also wants to expand on the queen side. So he goes knight to a4. I'm not sure why he did that. Anyways, so now I develop my bishop to d7 because I think that I want to put even more pressure on the b square here, and see, but at this point I think it would have been okay if I advanced the pawn. So let's see what that does. So if I took if I went to b5 and he takes, I would take and I would be okay, and he would have to retreat the knight. So there was no need for that bishop move, or in this case the file would be open as well to attack the knight. So I thought that would have been a better move than the bishop move, but that's what I played. And so he retreats the bishop to defend the knight, and here I take the knight with the bishop to takes a4. I think that's a terrible move. Why would I want to exchange my light square bishop for a knight that wasn't really that active, and I mean the knight there couldn't really do anything because it was restricted. He couldn't really go here. There was no outpost. He couldn't really take the pawn, and I guess the knight there, his idea was to attack here, push the pawns, and force me to basically take, because if I didn't take, then he takes, I take back, and then the knight would, well, not really, but anyways, or perhaps he would bring the bishop back and exert pressure there. Okay, so I sort of chickened out. So I took the knight. I thought it was dangerous, so I think that if I stayed relaxed, I would have seen better moves. Then he takes back with the bishop takes a4, and now I advance the pawn. So he takes, c takes b, a takes b, then he retreats the bishop to c2. So now I feel a little bit more relieved that I have a bit more space on the queen side. So I decide to advance to b4 to expand even more. So a takes b, queen takes b4, and I'm also happy that the a file is open for my rook. So in a sense, I developed the rook as well. So I'm happy with that move, and I don't have any isolated pawns. He has a b pawn that's pretty weak, but it is supported by his rook. So he decides to retreat the bishop back to d2, exerting attacking the queen. I retreat to b6, x-raying the king. So my idea now is to do a discovered attack on the king, but really moving the pawn here, I don't see how, you know, it's just weakening the pawn, so I'm not sure if that's a good move either. But anyways, an x-ray is always good because it opens up lines for tactics. So he takes d takes e. So he decides to open up the board a bit, and I guess trying to weaken the pawn chain over here and creating two weak pawns. So now I took with the knight, because there's no point in taking with the rook, because the rook is still controlling the whole e file. So taking with the knight, and then I saw that perhaps I would have an outpost here, and I didn't want to take with the pawn to weaken my king side here. So the fianchetto bishop and with the three pawns here, normally I feel safer keeping the pawns intact, and this bishop becomes really important as well. So now he goes bishop to e3, protecting the king from the x-ray, and I guess he's x-raying my queen as well. So perhaps he's thinking of expanding on the queen side here, and this pawn now doesn't look so weak anymore. So of course I see that, and I think this was a bad move, because my rook was already, well, I went rook d8, but I think I should have kept the rook there, because you know, a rook on an open file is always better. But I thought I should protect my my weak pawn here, the d pawn. So now he decides to push his b pawn to b4, and with the idea of obviously I can't take, my queen is x-rayed, and so I have to run the queen, and getting out of the other x-ray from the rook. So now he So I think I perhaps saw that coming, so that's why I decided to X-ray his queen. So once the if he exchanges, um, and I would exchange back, then the queen would be under discovered attack. But then he decided to push the pawn to b5, which I feel was the better move because now he has a passed pawn. I didn't even see that one coming. So usually if there's an isolated pawn, the strategy is really to blockade it. But I think so that's the idea with the knight going back there, to perhaps blockade the pawn. And so he goes queen to d2, I guess connecting the rook, making them a bit stronger. Now I should have followed the idea of blockading that pawn. So I think at this point I'm very emotional and not thinking very well and not following through with my initial plans, and getting distracted, and things are just not very, all my moves are not very fluid, and they're all over the place, and as you can see, it's going to create some pressure for me. And so now he decides to go knight to c3, which now I'm losing a tempo, and I knew it, and I was disappointed with that move. And plus the knight now defends the pawn, so not very good move. So the rook retreats to a3, exerting pressure on the knight, but I guess it's protected by the queen, so I'm not really doing anything there. So perhaps I should have gone back to a5 instead, but that's the move I chose. So now he goes knight to d5, attacking the queen, and here I make a huge mistake. So I decide to exchange queens to simplify the position, and of course he exchanges. But now what happens now is that it leaves my rooks in a really bad position, because after knight to e7 check, then I realized that the next move would lose one of the rooks. So I had no choice. I had to protect the king first to f8, attacking the knight. So he goes knight to c6, forking both rooks. And I thought that, well, since I'm going to lose a rook anyways, I should attack his bishop. So I think at this point he should have perhaps move the bishop back here and exert pressure on the rook here, and still forking attacking both rooks, but I guess he decided that the rook was worth more, so he took on d8, and I took on rook takes e3. So at this point my rook is pretty active, so I'm happy about that. His knight doesn't really have anywhere else to go, but I think he did the right move by taking knight e6 and messing up my pawns. So I had to take with the f pawn, and now, but my center is pretty good, and I think there's I have a pass pawn, he has a pass pawn, and there's another way for me to perhaps create two pass pawns that are connected that could support each other. So so now he starts pushing with the b pawn, so b6, and I'm starting to feel pressure, and luckily for me, the king is still in a vulnerable position to my bishop. So I decided to go bishop to d4 and x-raying the king for a discovered attack once I move the rooks, and perhaps attack the bishop here. And plus now the bishop is x-raying the pawn, so my next idea is to perhaps push the c pawn and having a discovered attack on the pawn, the b pawn. So of course he moves his king because he sees the x-ray, and now I follow through with the idea of exerting pressure on the b pawn and forcing it to move forward, I guess. And now I'm really feeling a lot of pressure because I'm regretting the fact that I didn't blockade it earlier, and I went my my rook instead, which was a terrible move. So here I go bishop to a7, and I knew that the b8 square was protected by the knight and the bishop, so he would not exchange because this is a very valuable pawn, so he's probably going to want to hang on to it. So he starts to push on the king side with h4. So here's my other idea of creating my connected pass pawns, but also the idea of opening up the e file for my rook to retreat to take care of his pawn here. So I was really glad when he decided e takes d, because I don't think he had any other choice, or else I would simply advance the pawn, right? So I think that was a or perhaps he could have used his other rook, right? So I thought that would have been the better move, but if he did that, I could still advance this pawn, right? So because my bishop is protecting it, and then eventually I may exert more pressure by advancing and attacking the bishop, and then so I guess he didn't like that idea, so he took instead, and I took back. But now I'm really happy because I have an open file and two connected pass pawns, so so I'm happy about that. And he goes rook to b5, attacking my my weakest pawn, and it just gives me the opportunity to advance the pawn, which was my initial idea anyways. So I thought that was a bad move from his part, and now he decides to change his tactic to try to attack my bishop, and I think this was also a bad move because now it gives me a chance to blockade the pawn, and perhaps later on find out some way to retreat the rook and move the knight, and then like move the knight here and then attack the pawn. Okay, so so now he makes an even worse move. So now he went the rook a8, which I think didn't make sense at all, because usually you would move your rook here if there was another rook here perhaps, hoping for an exchange, and then the pawn would promote to a queen. But moving your rook here is not really protecting the pawn. It's not, and what's he gonna do? He's gonna exchange with the bishop for a rook, which doesn't make sense. And now he's tying up his rook. He is x-raying my king, so, but he doesn't have a dark square bishop to chase away my or a knight to chase away my bishop, so the pin doesn't really work. So I'm happy with his move, so I decided to push. d3, pushing his bishop away. So he goes bishop to a4, attacking my knight. Now, so this is fine, but I'm not worried because I think that I have a good counterattack with my pawn, so I decided to let him have the knight, because now as I push my pawn to d2, my next move, if he decides to take the knight, my next move would be rook to e1, putting a lot of pressure on this rook. So at this point, if he exchanges, I promote to queen, so that would be devastating for him. So I think he could see that pressure, and if he doesn't exchange, then I'll simply promote to a queen, right? So not good for him. So taking the knight would be a mistake, I think. So he decides to, so he panics, I guess, and he decides to take my bishop in exchange for his rook, which I think at this point is a terrible move, because he was up in material, but now we're even, and I actually have 2 pass pawns versus 1 pass pawn that is blocked, and there's nothing he can really do to chase away my knight because he doesn't have a dark square bishop, and that rook needs to stay there to defend the promotion of the pawn. So he's in a pretty bad shape, and I think at this point I'm leading. So he decides to move his king, which makes sense, but I thought that was a bad move because he should have moved his king here instead. So if I decide to exchange, obviously he doesn't have to take it, right? So he can simply wait and make other moves, because the bishop is protecting this area and the king is protecting the rook. So if he starts pushing pawns perhaps, and if I exchange, then now the king is closer to these pawns, and then my whole attack fails. So I thought that would have been the better move, but I don't know, he didn't like the idea of the pressure, and that's why he went his king to h2. But now he's further away from my pawns, and he's not really protecting his rook, or maybe he thought he should bring his king closer to his pawns here for an attack on the king side. So I proceeded with my plan. So rook to e1, attacking his rook and threatening to promote my pawns. And so if his rook runs away, then I'll promote the pawn, right? So if the rook goes here, I can promote the pawn, and then exchange and be up a piece. And if the other choice is to retreat the rook, which he did closer to his king. So if I exchange, then he exchanges, and I still can't promote, okay, because the bishop is protecting the d1 square. So exchanging rooks is not the best thing. So I had an idea here to continue pushing my pawns to c3, and I don't think he saw it coming, but my idea here was to move my rook over to the c file, so that I would still be protected by the pawn. So if he decides to exchange, then I would promote and not so basically trying to promote my pawns and any other square besides the D1 square, which is protected by the light square bishop. But if I went here, then it would protect this pawn, and then I can push, and then I can promote by disconnecting the bishop from the D1 square. So I'm not sure if he saw that coming, so he decides to push to G4. And so at this point I'm really confident with my position, so I go rook to C1. So I thought that was the best move of the match. Kind of makes up for all the other terrible moves. And now he decides to push pawn H5, and I knew at this point that it wouldn't make sense for me to capture because I'm losing a temple here, and if he captures, then he's opening up his file for the rook to attack the king. So that's what he wants, and then plus he just created a pass pawn as well. So so I knew that if I did something else and continue with my plan, pushing the C pawn, then if he captures, then I capture, keeping everything closed and not allowing him to have a pass pawn and an open file for the rook on the G file. So that would be the better move. And obviously now my next move would be to promote to a queen, and then he would have to exchange his rook, and I would be up a major piece. So when I advanced my pawn, he knew he had to sacrifice his exchange his bishop for the pawn. So he took on C2, and I took on C2, rook takes C2, and he knew he had to blockade my pawn. That was his only move. So now I was sort of stuck, and he was stuck. He had more pawns on the king's side, so that was his only hope, and my knight here was stuck as well. So I guess instead of taking with the pawn and losing a temple, I knew he would have to take, because there was no point in keeping the position closed. Well, actually maybe that could have been a good move, but then I would simply perhaps move my king to attack this pawn, which I thought was kind of slow, so perhaps attacking these pawns would make more sense. But then he had his king there, so I think at this point it's taking is the best move. So he takes. So H takes G. I take back. H takes G. So he decides to centralize his king, which made sense. I push my pawn up to prevent his king from penetrating here to F4, and at this point I think he could have advanced his pawn to create a pass pawn, and then perhaps I would be in trouble here. But he decided to retreat his king to take care of the D pawn, which I think is a good move, because this pawn is extremely dangerous, and once he frees that pawn and my knight is stuck here, you know, 2 pawns and a king against 1 pawn and a king, so he does have the advantage there. So I thought that was the correct move. Now I moved my knight here, so I knew that if I did that and he promotes to a queen, I can still capture. So I was fine. I wasn't worried about the pawn at this time, but I wanted to centralize my knight a little bit more, so that if he attacks the pawn here, I could I could maybe check, but that would make sense because then he I guess would attack the knight, and then well, the idea here is, well, I guess that doesn't make sense, or else this pawn here would promote, right? So I don't know why I just centralized my knight, because I didn't have any other moves, and I knew that as the his next move would be king to e2, attacking the pawn, and then I knew that I would go rook to b2 to attack his b pawn. So I was okay exchanging my d pawn for the b pawn, because that way it frees up my knight. And I didn't want to leave my knight here, and then so let's go back here. So if right now there was no other move for me to make, because if I went this move and he goes here, and then what, right? So I still have to wait for him to take the pawn, so I don't want to take the pawn first. I could have, I don't think it would have changed anything, but those are the moves that I chose. And so we exchange pawns, and now I'm comfortable, because it's a rook and a knight versus a rook and a pawn. So he tries to attack my pawn, and I put him under check. So he retreats the king, and then at this point we stopped. I stopped recording the move, so I'm playing from memory. But basically, he runs out of time. Okay, so we play a couple of more moves, and you know, that's the end of it, because at this point he's pretty much lost, because my knight is more powerful, and there's no way for him to really create a pass pawn. So in the end he blunders, and he ends up with a rook versus my pawn, my knight, and my rook, and he runs out of time. Okay, so thanks for watching, and I hope you learned something. So this was one of my amateur games, so hopefully I'll grow and not play this way in the future. So I think I got lucky this time.